Hello and welcome to the video. This is a reminder of all the things you can do to try and avoid losing a model in the first place, but if you are unlucky enough to lose a model, how you can potentially get it back. Now, I'm making this video for one of my Patreons, John, who's just unfortunately lost a quad. It's always heartbreaking when you lose a model, be it a quadcopter or a wing or a plane or something else, because so much time and effort and money goes into these things. When they disappear, it is a bit heartbreaking. So I'm going to go through this at a reasonable speed. None of this should be new to you. It's more of a refresher and a reminder for those of us that fly regularly. I'll put time codes down below so you can zip to the stuff and just have a look at all these tips. So the first tip I'll give you is don't try too much on your first flight, particularly if you're maiden flights and you haven't flown it, or you've changed the FPV system, or you've messed around with how the GPS is connected, or the antenna is routed, or however it is, or maybe it's just a new model. Do not try too much on that maiden flight. It is tempting to get a little bit too carried away and to fly it too far away, but the farther away you fly it, the more chance that you are going to have something bad happen, and it's going to be too far away for you to find it before sunset, and then you'll never see it again. My top tips for this are going to be: don't fly too far away from yourself. I know it can be tempting to. Stay relatively close. Fly over an area with relatively short grass. That's my best tip, because then if it does come down, you're going to be able to see the thing. And also, if you can find a willing participant to go along with you to act as your spotter and another pair of eyes. Sometimes you might be able to not see something, and they can also help recover it if something horrible does happen. But also, in lots of places, you need a spotter in order to be legal when you're doing FPV. Second tip then is kind of an extension of the first tip, I guess, which is when you are doing your maiden flight, don't fly over water, don't fly over lots of vegetation, huge trees, massive bushes, places that you can't get to that are private property, because you know what? That is absolutely where the model is going to end up. These things are built like golf balls. They are water and wood seekers, and when they're uncontrolled, they'll always hit one, if not both of those things. Third thing I would recommend is set up and test a failsafe on the bench. If something does happen to the radio or the connection between the radio and your model, you want your model to do something that is expected, and that is, in my instances, and we'll get into GPSs in a moment, fly back and land safely. But it can just be cut the motors on something like a fixed wing, because on fixed wings, when you have a failsafe condition and the failsafe hasn't properly been set and the motor continues to spin, these things can fly for a long time. Our current record for recovery of a model that got away from a pilot has been just under 1.5 miles using the tips I'm about to go to. But if you set your failsafe, if something happens to the radio, the model will cut the throttle and gently come down, and it will have much less distance to walk. Next tip is, if you are powering the model and you're getting ready to fly and something isn't right, stop, unplug the battery, put it back in the box, and take it home and check it out. Don't risk it. I have only ever lost 2 quads in my flying career, and one of them was for that exact reason. I powered it up, the on-screen display appeared in my DJI goggles. However, it's a black screen, so it doesn't look like the camera was connected. Wasn't sure about that. I kind of unplugged the battery, had a look at all the connections, they looked okay, plugged the battery back in. It all burst into life. Thought, oh, okay, there we go. Maybe just the DJI system hadn't initialized okay. Started to fly it. Just after I took off, I was accelerating away. Completely lost the video as well. My spotter didn't see where it came down, and we never found it, and it was lost. And of course, that one had an action camera on it as well, so it was a very, very expensive lesson. So learn from my mistake. If you power it up and something isn't quite working properly, something is a bit weird, stop, take it home, check all the connections, make sure nothing's come loose, and you're not going to lose the thing when you fly it next time. My big tip is, if you are going to be adding lots of expensive stuff, like in the example where I had a flight controller and things like an action camera and a DJI HD setup in that model, do yourself a favour, stick a GPS on the back. These things are worth their weight in gold, 20, 30 pounds and dollars. You can wire it into Betaflight as of Betaflight 4.4 and iNav. These things will allow the quad and the plane to fly back to you in the event of a problem. Worth their weight in gold, literally, when you're on the bigger quads by the time you've got everything on there. It is also useful. It gives you the distance and direction to home in your on-screen display, shows you the height. Those kind of additional things are incredibly useful. And also I would add the return to home or fail-safe stuff onto a switch on your radio. Get used to flicking that. So if you are flying and the FPV stuff cuts out, which is what a lot of the lost quads are about, if that does happen to you, you can just flick the return to home, the oh dear switch, I think as flight test used to call it, and the model will fly back to you, whether it's a quad like this or a wing or a plane. I've only had to use it a couple of times in my flying career, but I've always been incredibly grateful that I've had that ability. I know some of the smaller quads don't have them, but it's easy to add a little bracket on the back. And let's say for 20-30 pounds, I'm not going to risk 600, 700, 800 pounds worth of quad, battery, walk snow unit, action camera and everything else on here for the sake of that small amount of money. While we're on the subject of things you can add to your quad, one thing you can of course add is going to be a buzzer. Although buzzers and those kind of piezoelectric things sound incredibly loud in an environment like this where it's relatively quiet, my experience is even out in the field, unless you stood within about 10 feet of the thing, you just can't hear them. Similarly, you can get things like the ViFly stuff where you have a light as well as a beeper, and those tend to be slightly louder. You have things like lost model alarms. They're incredibly useful, but I think they're only useful once you are very close to the model or you are flying in a very quiet location, which isn't always the way. If there's a bit of wind, then that's normally going to drown out the sound of one of these things if you're not right on top of it. But also things like if it's dusk and you're flying, that kind of pulsing strobing light can be very handy to figure out whereabouts in the tree canopy you've got to climb up to get the thing back. Don't forget you can also add lights and other pieces to something like this baby AR Wing Pro. This is quite a dark model. Unfortunately, if it lands in a very overgrown tree, it's going to be tricky to see. I add orange tape to a lot of my models. I know other people use things like plastic coat. It can be useful to have a model that's in contrast to the area that you're flying. If it does end up stuck in the side of a large bit of vegetation, you'll have a much better chance of seeing where it is. Next tip is always to have the DVR running in your goggles, even if you have no intention of using the footage. Now, stick an SD card in something like these Walk Snail Goggle X's, the DJI system, HD0, analog goggles, whatever it is. Most of them have the ability to record what you can see in the goggles. If you're flying FPV, remember to turn it on. You only need the last 10-15 seconds to give you an idea of where the thing went in before you lost the signal, but that can be the difference between you searching in the right field and the wrong field. So always remember to set your DVR, always remember to leave enough space on the SD card and set it up so it automatically starts recording. That has probably recovered half a dozen models in my life where I've been flying a little bit too spirited, clipped something, flipped and rolled into the grass, and then being able to get very close just by having a look at what I could see before it disappeared out of my view. The other benefit of having a GPS on the back of a quad like this is if you have telemetry turned on and you're using a system that sends telemetry back to the radio, the GPS coordinates are going to be sent back to the radio. Now you can also save that stuff as a log file. Most of us don't tend to, I don't. But if this is stuck in the ground and the antennas are transmitting a little bit, you'll be able to, when you get a signal, also to be able to get the GPS latitude and longitude, and you can just put that into the map on the phone and it'll show you exactly where the thing is sat. Again, another very, very good reason to add the GPS. If your quad comes down and you are still getting some kind of telemetry or any kind of signal from the receiver back to your radio, then you can use that to get within a handful of feet of the model using the RSSI trick. Now, I've done a video on this. I would recommend going and have a look at that. The radio is always monitoring how good the signal strength is between the antennas on the model and the radio. And because the radio antennas are kind of directional, they have nulls, you want to think of it like that, there is a way where you could use the radio like a direction finder and then watch the signal strength increase as you walk towards the model and you can find it. I have probably recovered dozens and dozens of mine and my friends' models in those instances where it's gone down, particularly in very long grass, where anything over kind of, calf height, anything like that will just swallow up quads and even larger planes. Being able to walk out into the field and use that RSSI trick can get you very close. Obviously, all of this kind of relies on the fact that the thing does still have the battery attached. I would recommend, if you've never played with the RSSI trick and tried it with your radio and the models that you have, go and watch that video and try it now. Take it to the field, put the model down somewhere away from you and just have a go. Practice so that the first time you need that trick isn't when you're freaking out because your model's just gone down and it had your brand new GoPro on it. And my last piece of advice is, if you are unlucky enough to lose a model, take a deep breath when it happens. Easier said than done sometimes, particularly if it's a model that you can't afford to lose. It doesn't have to be really expensive. It might be a model that you've saved up for ages, or you've invested in the walk snail. It's your first walk snail stuff, and it feels horrible. It makes you feel physically sick, or it does me, when you lose a model. But take a moment, think about all the things, think about this video, think about the RSSI trick, the GPS data and the telemetry, the buzzer, all those things that we've talked about today. It will give you a very good chance of getting it back. My last tip is, if all else fails and you are flying in an area and you're not sure about stuff, take it easy, don't try it too much on the first time. And as one of my friends did and has got his plane back because of it, he actually wrote his phone number on that plane, and when it disappeared, didn't find it, but somebody did, and he got a phone call and it was recovered. So that's also another option as well. So hopefully that's a great reminder. Please keep all this stuff in mind next time it happens. Hopefully it never will, but if it does, at least now you've got something to help you remember all the things that you can try if it does happen to you. Thank you for watching my video. Check out the playlist, and adding Painless 360 to your search terms will help you find my content. If you haven't done so already, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps a lot. You can support the time I spend here answering questions and helping others by using the links in the video description.